Keeping the football theme going with another guy named Joe who played football. This one is a bit of a stretch because he only played football in high school, but he was a football star. I've showed you Joe Montana's autograph photo to my dad, and I recently did a show on the great Joe Cap. And I ended my last episode of Held by Legends, Signed by Heroes, talking about a young Joe Namath. Well, this Joe was 6'1" and 190 pounds and could have played in the NFL, but the chances of him being a quarterback like these other three Joes was zero. So he chose to play baseball, and by doing that, put his name in the MLB history book. I'm talking about Joseph Van Durham, nickname Pop or Joe. Outfielder, MLB debut, September 10th, 1954. You know when I tell you the exact date of a player's debut? He made MLB history. Joe Durham became the first black player to start a game for the Baltimore Orioles in franchise history, and 2 days later became the first black player to hit a home run for the club. Joe was born in 1931 and grew up in a small town in Virginia that was heavily segregated, called Newport News. This was at a time in America when marriage was high and divorce was low. Most kids had a dad unless he was away working or serving in the military. Joe never got to meet his dad, who contracted pneumonia and died 2 weeks before Joe was born. Newport News? They had their own Class B baseball team that played in the Piedmont League. They were called the Royals and played at Builders Park, and like everything else in town, it was segregated. Joe remembers watching from the right field bleachers in the black section, seeing Gil Hodges play at the Dodgers affiliate, and other future stars who would come through the town. As a kid, he never dreamed of playing in the big leagues. He said we weren't allowed, and didn't take baseball seriously until high school, where he would become an all-around sports star, picking up 13 letters, and in track running the 100 and 9.8, and starring in football. But basketball was his main sport, leading his team to titles with him winning awards each year. Joe Durham's favorite high school baseball story was when he hit 4 home runs and got 2 singles in one game. After graduating high school, he traveled around North Carolina and Virginia making money playing semi-pro ball with the Tri-County Dodgers, the Bombers, and his local team, the Royals. In the fall, Joe would attend college in Raleigh and played on the school's basketball team while still playing baseball on the weekends. Joe's autograph in the thumbnail? My dad got that in 1958 at an Orioles spring training game versus the San Francisco Giants in Arizona. That scorecard has 18 signatures on it, with Joe and Larry Doby being the only Oreos. All the other autographs are Cleveland Indians. Yes, Larry Doby was on the Orioles for spring training. Joe would get a job as a clerk at U.S. Army Fort Eustis, and it was there in 1952 Joe met Willie Mays, who was stationed at the fort while Willie was doing his time in the Army. Joe and Willie would spend the weekends playing together on the Royals, with Joe moving to left field to make room for the newly crowned 1951 Rookie of the Year. It was at Fort Eustis Willie Mays could hone his skills and play a little more freely without the pressure of performing in the big leagues. Plus, he could learn a thing or two. For instance, his famous basket catch that looks so cool if you can pull it off without dropping the ball. Well, that was taught to him by one of the older players on the Royals, a guy named Al Fortunato, and Willie would perfect that catch while at Fort Eustis. Willie also worked on his infamous back-to-the-plate, over-the-shoulder catches, which he used in the 1954 World Series, putting him in infamy. Willie Mays missed more than 250 MLB games while serving in the military, and will tell you that he would have broken Babe Ruth's all-time home run record. And if you see him, you can ask him, because Willie Mays is a living legend. Back to the man of the moment, Joe Durham was signed by St. Louis Browns owner Sports Shirt Bill Veeck prior to the start of the 1953 season. But it was the old, I've got good news and bad news. See, the problem was the Browns' only farm team with room for an outfielder played in the segregated South where Joe was not welcome. So instead, he joined the Chicago American Giants of the Negro League, a club run by Abe Saperstein, who also owned the Harlem Globetrotters and was a close friend of Bill Veeck. Later on in that 1953 season, Joe Durham and Willie Tasby were 2 of the first blacks to integrate the Piedmont League, while they both played for the Browns affiliate, the York White Roses. They had to play in many hostile cities whose residents let the boys know they weren't welcome and would have trouble getting food and lodging. Joe said it was hard to be part of a team when you're separated from the rest of the guys all the time. As bad as it was while in town, the abuse was worse at the games. Joe also said that Willie Tasby wanted to go in the stands after some fans, after hearing ball games worth of the N-word, mother talk, and slurs for one day. But Joe said, "Let him talk, Taz," even though there were times he too wanted to go in the stands, and said there were cities up north that were worse than down south. So we're coming down to the end of the 1953 season, and the city of St. Louis is about to lose a baseball team. When Browns owner Bill Veeck found out the Cardinals' new sponsor was a large beer company now backing the club, he saw the writing on the wall and knew he couldn't compete with that type of money. Sports shirt Bill already sold off his best players during the season just to keep the team afloat. And by season's end, they didn't even have enough balls for a full practice. This meant the smart move was to move, so that's what they did, to the city of Baltimore, who was looking for a team. And MLB was looking for a way to get rid of Bill Veeck and his antics. Sports shirt would be bought out and then forced out. But Joe Durham was still with the franchise when they moved to Baltimore, becoming the Orioles for the 1954 season, but was sent to the San Antonio Missions in the Double-A Texas League, where he spent most of the season. Then in August, I don't know if it was by a letter, telephone call, or a knock at the door, but Joe was drafted into the Army. He was able to get a 60-day deferral so he could finish the season and make money for his family. It was at this time the Orioles called Joe up to the majors, and that's where he made a new friend who had just come up to the majors himself the season prior. Joe Durham said this about his new friend. "One player who took me under his wing was Don Larson. He had a brand new 1954 Oldsmobile, and he used to pick me up for practice. Otherwise, I would have to spend money on cabs. I couldn't afford a car." On September 10th, 1954, in front of just over 5,000 fans at Baltimore's Memorial Stadium, Joe Durham would make history that night when he became the first black player to start a game for the Baltimore Orioles in franchise history, batting third, playing left field. Then, 2 days later, in the second game of a doubleheader, he would make history again when he was the leadoff batter in the sixth inning and facing Philadelphia A's lefty, Al Cima. Joe pulled a hanging slider up and over the left field fence. This would be the first home run ever hit by a black player for the Orioles. Joe Durham said this about that historic at-bat. "Once I hit it, I knew it was gone. I got good wood on it." He also recalled how nobody had mentioned the significance of what he had done. Who would? He's the only black on the team. But it turns out somebody he didn't even know knew the significance, a local fan he would soon meet. This fan was not only happy to have pro baseball back in Baltimore after 50 years, but she knew what it meant to have a Negro on an MLB team in the year 1954. So it's a few days later, and Joe is leaving the stadium after a game when he notices an older black lady standing just outside the park, and it seems she's waiting for him. The lady comes up to Joe and gives him that historic home run ball he hit a couple games prior. Joe thanked her and offered to pay her money for the ball. She politely refused. 60 years later, Joe Durham laughs as he recalls that encounter, saying it was a good thing she declined the money because I didn't have any.